Jedi. They're real.
The Force. It's calling to you. Just let it in.
Alright, so this is a very special retrospect review, and funny thing that this is the final one that we're doing for 2025, right? Because 10 years ago, myself, Ricardo, and CC, back when CC was in Trinidad, we talked about a film in December of 2015 called Star Wars The Force Awakens. And now 10 years have passed, and we're finally going to talk about this film, in a 10-year retrospective perspective, right? But with us this time is, of course, Tracy Hutchins and Alicia, aka Dark Alice, right? So at least we have, some extra perspectives on this film here, right? So, of course, I don't know if you did this, Ricardo, but, CC and I, we actually re-listened to ourselves, talk about that film, which we did back in your dad's place. And, boy, it was so funny, listening to that in retrospect, because, wow, I didn't even know about normalizing audio and, trying to cancel out the background noise, because I'm hearing dogs bark and then cars passing. I'm sorry, we did not care, right? So in case y'all didn't know, Alicia and Tracy, this was...
I tried to think of any of the takes hold up at all. I show most of that age like me. But what passed for an edgy take back then?
Yeah, well, I'll say that, just it was a context, right? Yeah, this was when we actually started, when Ricardo and I actually started this podcasting journey in the first place, right? So this was the last film that we talked about before we did our best of the year list, right? Our first ever best of the year list, right? I think it was, right? But yeah, no lie, I mean, Star Wars The Force Awakens was a big deal, right? And just looking back at the film and listening to that review, I was reminded of how big a deal that was, right? Because this was the first film to be released without Fox's help, right? This was Lucasfilm and Disney, right? So this was the Disney era that officially started, right? And Ricardo, I'll just refresh your memory, right? You were saying that you were just to kind of paraphrase, you were sort of fearful of the fact that, wow, we really gonna get this thing from Disney forever. That's what you said, forever. We're gonna get this output of Star Wars content from Disney forever. That's what you said, right?
I vaguely remember the term the purgatory of mediocrity. I ever say that?
No. All right. So you called J.J. Abrams, who directed this film, and The Rise of Skywalker, which I'll get to in a bit, right? You called him the master of mediocrity. And he says that he's able to take things that you are familiar with, right, and give it a fresh coat of paint and make you appreciate it, right? Whether you're a fan of Star Wars or not, but he gives it this fresh sheen that you like it, right? But you could tell, just paraphrasing what it is you said, that's done in such a way where it's designed to sell, it's designed to make money, it's designed to get appeal.
I still believe that.
Yeah,
that didn't change.
No, and in a way, thinking about it because I listened to our review after watching Force Awakens, right? I was like, you're kind of right. You're actually correct. That's kind of how this movie is, right? But yeah, so to get to the point of this review here, right? What's going to make this review pretty special? It's not just, us looking back at a review that we did 10 years ago, but sort of looking back at this particular film and saying, yeah, this holds up for this reason and this doesn't hold up for this reason as well, right? So that's, quick preamble, right? Before we get to Alicia and, Tracy, right? But yeah, Force Awakens was a big deal, right? I'll never forget, it was myself, Ricardo, and, a couple other friends of ours. We went to see this in IMAX. It was a night screening, right? Never forget that, right? And it was a big deal, right? Because, again, it was like the I think the reason why it was a big deal for us is because we haven't had a Star Wars film since 2005, right? When Revenge of the Sith came out, right? We
It
did a
wasn't
review.
getting anymore.
Yeah. And we did a retrospect review for its 20th I think it's 15th anniversary, sorry, right? And still to this day, I think that it is one of the best Star Wars movies we've ever gotten. I would say it is a truly influential film, right? In the sense that this was the first Star Wars film to get a PG-13 rating. This was the first film where, to me, similar to Empire Strikes Back, this was George Lucas saying, here's what. Okay, y'all was laughing at Phantom Menace. Y'all was laughing at the dialogue in Attack of the Clones. Here's what. I'm gonna make you take my shit seriously. I'm not just gonna slap a PG-13 rated fit for the sake of it, right? I'm gonna make this dark in all the right ways without being too edgelordy. I'm gonna make you care about this stuff. I'm gonna make you feel every minute of Anakin's heel turn to the dark side. I'm gonna make you feel that. I felt it when I first saw it in theaters. I felt it over the years when I recapped it, and then when I did the retrospect review of it, I was like, yeah, it still holds up. Like, Anakin's heel turn is so powerful, though, so effective, right? And I would say, yeah, like, it changed the course of Star Wars content forever. It's just like, listen, it's still the goofy, Frank Oz puppet stuff with lightsabers and force and stuff like that, right? But we're gonna take this serious enough where it's like, yeah, you gonna understand why this franchise is held up for so long, right? But yeah, I thought Revenge of the Sith was it, right? I can't remember if in my head I ever pondered the possibility of more Star Wars movies, right? But yeah, like many people, some people, I was shocked. Like, wait, okay, Disney buy Lucasfilm? Oh, whoa, okay.
Yeah, that was big news.
Wow,
That was real
okay,
big.
shit, damn, right? Yeah, so when Force Awakens come, I was like, okay, big deal, right? Even though I had my expectations low, because like, okay, Disney, Lucasfilm, okay, I see what they were doing with the Marvel Studios stuff, with Avengers. So okay, I have some hope here. Okay, but then when I saw Force Awakens, I was like, yeah, I enjoyed it, right? And it was my 5th pick for best film of 2015. Like, I enjoyed it for what it was, right? But the issue I had then, and sorry to say I have now, is the reliance on nostalgia. It's like, hey, remember this from episode 4? Remember this? We're gonna give you the hits, man. We're gonna give you this, right? But because it's J.J. Abrams, right? It's the same beats done again, but just with a fresh coat of paint, right? So, just paraphrasing what I said back with that review of Force Awakens, yeah, it's the same thing with 2009 Star Trek, right? It's the Star Trek that I love, but I'm gonna give it that fresh coat of paint. I'm gonna give it gonna make it more modern and fresh, right? Which, yes, works, right? So it's catering to fans and non-fans alike, right? But I just felt in this case, it just felt like, okay, we just had to play the beats again, and it wasn't really like progressing the story in a way that, it kind of didn't fully justify its existence. That's the best way I could sum it up, right? Let's talk quickly about the sequels, right? Because this is the Skywalker trilogy we're talking about here, right? Last Jedi still remains my favorite film in that trilogy. I defended it when it came out. I enjoyed that film when it came out. It was in my top 5 as well. I was aware of the backlash that it got, and I will never forget that there was somebody or some group, whoever, who did, swear to God, an online petition saying, we want this show erased from the face of the earth. We want this thing removed. We don't care if it's showed in theaters. We don't care if it's shown in IMAX for how much weeks. We want this thing removed. This is blasphemous. How dare you show us atheist Luke? How dare you show us Mary Sue, Ray and all that kind of stuff, right? I'll talk about Mary Sue in a bit in my review of the film, right? But yeah, I felt that show, which was directed by Rian Johnson, took a lot of big swings, it took a lot of risks too, while I felt that Force Awakens was just too safe. It was just pandering to the nostalgic stuff because it was safe. It's like, all right, if I play those beats, people will love it. And it was right. People loved the film because it was taking them back to seeing not just not specifically Phantom Menace, but it took them back to the first Star Wars movie. It took them back to episode 4. That's what it did, right? And it worked. It worked, right? But with this one, with Last Jedi, it took a lot of huge risks too. And I thought that it worked. Like it absolutely worked, right? Even story arcs that I didn't care for too much, like the stuff involving, Finn. I'll talk about Finn in a bit, and Rose and them looking for the code break and all that kind of stuff. I felt like it totally didn't really match, but like looking back at it, like with the few viewings I gave, and then because I actually like watched the entire trilogy in preparation for this review here, right? Yeah, this still somehow made it fit, right? But for me, what really made it work was Luke Skywalker. What was his arc and how it connected to how it connected to Rey and Kylo Ren, right? And yeah, how it all played off in the end absolutely works as well. This being the last film in its entirety where we see, Carrie Fisher, right? Just those moments absolutely work, right? And just the calls that they made, right? But then, just to wrap things up, we had to talk about The Rise of Skywalker, right? Which, yes, myself, CC, and Ricardo, we met up again and we talked about, right? So yes, folks, this was my pick for worst film of 2019. This was the last film. I think that was the last film I saw before I got to doing my best and worst of this, right? But yeah, to me, this was a massive disappointment. And I actually re-listened to that review, right? And I was reminded of why, right? But here's the thing. Well, okay, so the why back then was because I felt like JJ had to cater to that toxic fandom. I'm going to say that toxic fandom who hated everything about Last Jedi. It really felt like he had to cross correct everything that Ryan did and kind of do the stuff that the fans wanted, that they loved about Force Awakens, or what I didn't love about it, right? Which was just pandering to the fans too much, right? And it felt like to the point, like it just almost erased everything that Ryan did and just say, here's what. Because you gotta keep in mind, Ryan also wrote the script for Last Jedi, right? But this was like, okay, well, we had to cross correct all of this because the fans didn't like that. So we had to kind of bring it back to the fans, man. And I did not care for Palpatine being the villain. I was like, but if he's the main body, then why we had Snoke in the first place? Why wasn't Palpatine established in Force Awakens? He was not. They mentioned
That was
Vader,
a meme,
but they never mentioned Palpatine,
that became a meme, somehow Palpatine returned. Like,
Yeah, boy. And somehow
Oh,
you make
yeah,
this
that
man, or somehow you make this man super powered because you suck the force powers, I guess, out of, well, life force, whatever you want to call it, out of both Kylo and Rey, and suddenly he has powers so immense that he is able to shoot lightning bolts into all these big, carriers above him. I'm like, what? You know what I mean? But as I wrap up here, I can't believe I'm saying this, folks. I can't believe I'm saying this, right? At the time, in 2019, I gave that movie a 2 out of 5, which is the equivalent of I want my money back, right? In recapping this movie, because I actually watched this morning the time I was talking here, I warmed up to it slightly, a smidge. I don't hate the movie as much as I did back then. It's still a huge step down from Last Jedi, right? But I don't hate the film. It's one of those, oh, well, this is how they end it. Okay, fine, I guess. But it was like, oh my god, I hate this movie so much that I have to write this online petition and have it removed from the face of the earth, right? So I don't hate the film as much as I did back then, right? But it still feels like a step down in terms of just where the story went, right? But I do appreciate in retrospect how they tied up certain acts. Well, how they tied up, Rey's and Kylo's acts. I think that's the strength of the film, how they tied those two things up, right? And to extent, Poe as well, right? Because they kind of set up early on that Poe is supposed to be this leader, right? That's what they kind of set up from the beginning, but then they really established it in Last Jedi. And here's like, oh, I'm going to be the leader now because Leia dies, right? But I felt, unfortunately, Finn's arc was that really properly ended, because they could have set up, oh, why this is why I defected from being a stormtrooper. They didn't really do that. They just pair him with another ex-stormtrooper and kind of forget the relationship that they set up with him and Rose just become this, like, why was Rose in this movie?
On that.
Yeah, that's what you say. There's a book about it, right? Like, oh, there's a book after the fact,
I'll tell you. Well, when we get to that, because there's some stuff
about that Lucasfilm does. That is the only thing that annoys me about Lucasfilm generally when it comes to these things. But I'll tell you about that in a little while.
Yeah, so as I wrap up here, because I want to get to Alicia's and your thoughts on on the Skywalker trilogy before we kind of just talk about what works and what doesn't work about the Force Awakens, right? But yeah, the best way I could sum up Rise of Skywalker is like this, right? I would not buy this film separately on home media. But if it came out in a box set, can I imagine it's out on the trilogy is already out as a box set, right? I know the first six films are out on Blu-ray. I know there's a box set for it, right? But I would buy The Rise of Skywalker if it was part of a box set. That's the best way I could sum it up. I could watch Force Awakens, appreciate it for what it is, even though I don't love the film. I would watch, Last Jedi in a heartbeat because I love that film. But because it builds off of Force Awakens, I kind of had to watch the two of them. And because that film stops at a particular point and it ends with The Rise of Skywalker, I kind of reluctantly have to watch, The Rise of Skywalker, and then I'll watch it. I'll be like, oh well, okay, that's how it ends. All right, whatever, and I move forward with my life, right? That's the best way I could sum it up, right? But I will never buy that show individually because I don't think it stands on its own. It really relies on both Force Awakens and Last Jedi, even though the show, I would argue, tries everything that it could to sort of cross-correct everything that the Last Jedi did so brilliantly, but because of some stupid fans like, oh no, we can't do that again, so let's do the pandering stuff again, right? And I'll just stop there, right? But yeah, Alicia, your initial thoughts on The Force Awakens and how you feel about the Skywalker trilogy.
Well, to be honest with you, I don't have like a whole big deep obsession for the franchise itself. It's entertaining and I think it's wonderful to look at on the big screen. But I'm more like a Star Trek kind of a girl in terms of that.
Yep.
Yeah. So in terms of deeply analyzing about the Skywalkers and what it means and all that stuff, I wouldn't really get into that, but it's entertaining, and the the first Star Wars film were a big part of my childhood. I remember watching them and being obsessed with the little robot R2D2 because for me he was just like the cutest thing, and I wanted one exactly like him, a real life size one. Um, but in terms of what Matthew was saying about the Force Awakens kind of playing too much on the nostalgia, that was the aspect of the Force Awakens to me that I really liked, that I enjoyed, because I love to see in Princess Leia and Luke again. That moment where he's revealed at the end of the film was like, yeah, and the introduction of the new characters and seeing this stormtrooper defect. I love the whole mix of the entire thing. In terms of the trilogy itself, I agree with Matthew that the Rise of Skywalker kind of spoiled the direction that the trilogy was taken. And it happens when you shift the director too much. Just saying, when they shift the director, and then also to again when you pander to the whims of totally obsessive fans to the point where it's almost ridiculous. That is what happens. We have that same story that happened with the Snyderverse, with the Justice League Snyderverse, and these people flipping out because they want the Snyder cut and all this madness. That is why the trilogy had the downfall in the last film. But I agree with Matthew that The Last Jedi is really enjoyable, and I think people read too much into the atheist thing, because we are in a we like to argue we're in a modern day society where there are so many different likes and types of people and so on. So why, for goodness sake, in a film that never spoke about God or anything before, why Luke Skywalker coming out as atheist in The Last Jedi, why that was blown out of proportion to the point where they wanted to wipe this film from existence.
Yeah, and
To me, there are
if I
a
could just make a quick argument.
uh-huh.
Sorry to cut you there, right?
Yeah.
The reason why he doesn't trust he defects from the Jedi makes a lot of sense. Failure.
Yeah.
He have seen the Jedi fail before, like his
Right.
father and how he became Darth Vader. It makes a lot of sense, and comparing it to how he tried to save Kylo from his dark
Right.
past or whatnot, and he failed at that. That is totally justified. It makes sense.
Yes, because you're disillusioned at that point. Why would you go back? It's basically you had your heart and your spirit broken. So why would you go back to this belief and this way of life when you only see failure and detriment, and you see your loved ones passing away around you, and you're powerless to do anything about it, literally, you know? So the whole idea that they want this film wiped from existence, to me, there are a lot of other films that should be wiped away from existence, in my humble opinion, than to fight for The Last Jedi, to be stricken from the record. And I don't know what the future of the Star Wars franchise has, but in terms of a trilogy, it's a decent watch. Just kind of like The Rise of Skywalker, man, you have to take it with a grain of salt and the inconsistencies and so on. But like Matthew say, in rewatching it, you kind of, how you felt about it the first time you see it, you kind of warm up to it a bit. He's very right in that term, especially if you watch it, like binge it and say, oh, we're going to have a Star Wars trilogy day, and you put them on one after the other, you will enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah, agreed. And also I should mention to Ricardo, you were making a great point with Rise of Skywalker. Pacing was a serious
Okay.
issue in terms of
Oh,
just how character arcs shifted and whatnot. Yeah, there was serious pacing issues in that film, right? But again, understand why the show being what it is, I get it, right? I just wish it was better. But yeah, before we jump into Force Awakens, and we just kind of just share individual views in the film, looking back at it now, and we'll kind of interject here or there, right? But yeah, Tracy, your history with Force Awakens and the Skywalker trilogy. I should just start off asking this question. Yeah, I know you're an IMAX guy, right? So please tell me that you saw it in IMAX first time.
Oh yeah, I did. I had a brand new Saber, which was a foldable one, but it made noise. I had a brand new Saber, and I had because I'm actually checking out some old pictures right now, and I had my Stormtrooper mask, which it literally was like a beanie, but you could put it on over your face and see through it, and I had my Kylo Ren stuff later on and all that kind of stuff. I was ready, because once upon a time, Uncle George made Star Wars. He made Star Wars, went through all the hell and everything that he had to with like Fox and getting toys and whatever, all the things that was necessary. And he made Star Wars. But he had a vision as to how it would end. So he goes and he makes the prequels, and everybody goes nuts because the same, which is hilarious how society works there, because suddenly he comes out and starts talking about midichlorians, which makes the idea of the Force more of a scientific thing. How much
Right.
of midichlorians is in your bloodstream?
He quantified the Force, and people didn't like
He
that.
quantified it. Oh my God, Anakin has 200,000 midichlorians in his blood. This is something that has never been seen in life. Okay, cool. So the Force is science now. And some people went nuts. We know the story of Ahmed in terms of the Jar Jar Binks scene and all that kind of stuff. So I paraphrase it like this, but he sort of just packed away Star Wars in terms of theatrical filming. We know we had Clone Wars, his two heir apparents, which was Dave Filoni and Kathleen Kennedy. These two heir apparents can go ahead and build Lucasfilm in terms of where it needs to be. The former was doing things with animation, but we weren't sure what was going to happen in terms of new Star Wars movie. Maybe sometime, who knows? Maybe Uncle George will come out and decide to do it, but he parked it. Then came the $4 billion sale, 4 point something billion sale of Star Wars, which then brings the idea of, okay, so Lucasfilm, $4 billion acquisition of Lucasfilm. from Disney. It's now under this one umbrella. We have Marvel, we have Disney stuff, we have Fox is about to be bought over. Now we have a Lucasfilm. We have all of this there. Let's now bring back the idea. And I remember sitting and watching that first black and white cast photo, where all of them are in the circle and they're reading, and they had the San Diego Comic Con panel, and everything was. It was just such a moment. And then the first trailer, the first teaser happened with a black man as the first and main shot of the teaser trailer, and ends with Tyler, of course, holding his saber and Finn holding his saber. And people went berserk because heaven forbid that a black man should lead Star Wars. I once heard Samuel L. Jackson talking about the white bread of Star Wars. And that is the whole scene. So fast track all of those scenes there, and then we get to actually movie time. I must have seen that twice in one day or something along those lines, because I remember telling the office I'm going to work the day before, but I'm off to Star Wars. It was such a moment for me. It was like, okay, we are back. Yes, there were beats there that were reminiscent of Star Wars. Oh, look, there's a message that needs to be sent. A droid has a specific message. There's a ship that we need to get on. There's a girl that we need to find. All of these things is basically a new hope. But the idea of, one, the idea that Star Wars was back. Two, we have a film here that could reinvent the franchise. In the first couple of weeks alone, the reports came out was like, well, I think Disney has regained their $4 billion that they've made, and then with all the merchandise and everything that was there. Force Awakens still holds like this great spot in my heart, and of course the John Williams score. Whenever there's John Williams attached to anything Star Wars, it is just joy. Two things I will say in terms of the franchise in general, and then I'll be quiet. Is Lucasfilm has a tendency a lot to not take from their own well. For example, you have the planet Exegol, and you have that planet that Rey needed to go, Jakku, that needed to go back to. There are stories, there are actual canon stories, not just legend stories, but there are stories about how the Emperor had cloned himself, because he needed to be there forever and ever. Politicians like that, they always have to be around. He needed to be there forever and ever, and there were places and planets that held such power to the dark side that he could legitimately, if he wanted to, harness inside there. There's a story, I think, in the novelization of The Force Awakens, either that one or one of the other ones, where the plane, there's a landing there in Jakku, and there is a temple underneath the surface of Jakku where they are doing things with their scientists and their mystics to sort of bring it together. You have a book called Bloodlines, for crying out loud, which shows the story of Leia after, the events of the first three films, and just before you get into Force Awakens. She is actually running to be first, like the prime minister of the galaxy, like the president of the galaxy. And someone unearths the secret that her father is Darth Vader, and there's a whole set of chaos and all kinds of stuff like that, to the point where it ends with her forming the rebellion. And that leads into like 7 years before Force Awakens. Oh my God, you have this well. Use it. You even had Colin Trevorrow, who was supposed to be the director for what would eventually become The Last Jedi. And there's a story, it might be apocryphal, but there's a story from a comedian.
Oh, was he supposed to do 9 or 8?
Yes, that 9. Yeah, he was supposed to do 9. So it was JJ.
Rise of Skywalker.
It was JJ, and then Ryan, and then Duel of the Fates. The story that goes around, there's a story, full stop, that Collins was supposed to be doing something called Duel of the Fates, because I don't think that Kylo was meant to really get much of a redemption, or something was going to happen. So even if Palpatine came back and all the other things that happened, it's the idea of the Duel of the Fates. Things that you cannot escape are always going to be there. And then, of course, one of the Jurassics kind of didn't do too well, and he was ostensibly fired, it seems, from Lucasfilm. So, cut to JJ now having to pitch this film, together, kind of something. So you have that happening there in terms of The Last Jedi, which I saw at a midnight screening. It was hilarious being there for that midnight screening of it. And funny enough, I think that one might have been the last film I saw before 2020 gave us COVID and the close of everything. You know how that played out. But the Last Jedi of itself, The Last Jedi was this film that did this beautiful thing that said everybody is important. Your name does not have to be part of the big three or whatever it is like that. You could be a random broom kid who has no connection to anything and you are important because the Force deems you important. Then JJ comes back in and does what he needs to do, and here we have the three movies. My one gripe with The Force Awakens, and I think that's going to be the only thing, because it tied it back at the end of Last Jedi. When FN2187, after his friend dies, and FN2187 has the blood on his helmet, he stands up, and the camera work, there is a shuttering of the camera work as something happens, that he turns around trying to get his bearings. And I'm sitting in the cinema saying, Finn has force powers. Finn is force sensitive. And then he does that exchange with Kylo Ren. And that is never discussed again until the last 2 minutes of the last one, the Rise of Skywalker, because we all thought he was going to tell Rey "I love you" or whatever it is like that. He explains that he does have, and she says, "Yes, I know," and that kind of good stuff. Even the Lego story did a better handling of that. And then there are, again, coming back to the scenes with Lucasfilm, there are books that talk about how the First Order, if I'm remembering it correctly, the First Order decided to learn. And instead of just taking random people and having them as your stormtroopers, they got force-sensitive children. In the same way how the Jedi would take these children from a very young age, the Empire did the same thing. How do you then gloss over John Boyega's Finn, who is clearly force sensitive and could be trained? So you could have had two Jedis. You could have even had a whole scene where Rey was turning to the dark side and John has to do his best to, or whatever it is he wanted to do.
Listen,
and that was
they could have done the whole Mystic Dyad thing, That was set up in this, like they didn't do anything with that. Kinda.
And you have troves and troves and troves and troves of books. Now, that being said, I know me. We know that the next trilogy is going to be out soon, and it's going to be Rey-centric, and we don't know who is going to be coming back. Maybe Finn may be coming back. Maybe Poe may be coming back. Maybe we might actually have an Andor coming back, because we know now, spoilers for anybody who still hasn't seen Andor, there is a baby Andor who would be about 30, 40, 50 years by now. But in terms of generally speaking, I still have much love for the sequel trilogy. It's kind of hilarious to me in terms of hearing the same type of comments that people had when the prequel came out, and now everybody's like, the prequel is amazing. And I know in years to come, in fact, it's even starting now, the sequel trilogy may very well end up getting the same kind of treatment of, oh my God, this was the greatest thing ever, unless, Lucasfilm firmly plants their feet down and does really well by the new trilogy. So that's me.
All right. So, taking, what we spoke about into consideration, that'll be me, you, CC, and Ricardo. Let's start off with TC first. So, looking back at The Force Awakens 10 years from now, right? And to an extent, the Skywalker trilogy or saga, if you want to call it that. Yeah, what do you think about this film? In particular, this being the film that sort of kickstarted this whole Disney era of Star Wars films.
I don't know. Listening back to the episode that we did 10 years ago, I had this revelation that I am not the same person that I was 10 years ago, and my tastes have shifted in quite a few dramatic ways. And I think, especially rewatching the film, because I actually, after seeing it originally 10 years ago, in theaters in Trinidad, in IMAX, no less, and then rewatching it a couple weeks ago at home, 10 years later, having seen not only all the rest of the sequel trilogy, but The Mandalorian and several of the other shows, and having watched all of Clone Wars and all this other stuff, I cannot be kind to The Force Awakens, I don't think. After all these years, I think the big thing that shifted for me is that I was too generous. I am not going to talk about the entire sequel trilogy very much. I'm going to talk very briefly about it because in 2 years, Last Jedi will be having its 10th anniversary, and I would much rather have an entire episode talking about my thoughts on The Last Jedi than to try and mention it here. Talking about Force Awakens as a standalone work, I think for me, the thing about it at the time how do I put this? The thing about it at the time that I was generous about was I was like, well, this is the beginning. This is the beginning of this new trilogy and kind of the Disney era in general. We don't know where they're going with this. Let's give them a chance. Let's see where they go. And I think I have been overwhelmingly disappointed by where the Disney era in general has gone. I mean, obviously, there's great stuff. I love Book of Boba Fett. Need to see Andor. Love The Mandalorian. Rogue One is, I think, the best film of the Disney era, easily. But Last Jedi is a pretty close second. I need to revisit it because I'm kind of concerned how well it has aged given the 2 films it's sandwiched between. There's so many things about the Force Awakens that The Force Awakens sets up. And I know that Rian Johnson would try and take in more interesting directions in his film that then don't end up really amounting to much of anything. Like the whole thing where you're watching Force Awakens is like, oh, Rey is quite powerful with the Force. What's that about? Well, she's Palpatine's granddaughter. And the film is full of these weird kind of like, oh, this could be really interesting. Pity that I know that they take it in a really boring direction. And that's kind of the extent to which I want to talk about the film as it connects to the sequel trilogy, which is very much that like, it's like Tracy was saying about the whole, you could have gone in so many directions with John Boyega. It's like a ship that's supposed to go sailing out into the ocean to discover new things, and instead just kind of sticks very close to the shore, almost afraid to venture too far out. And that's kind of where I find myself with Force Awakens. It's because it's not about things like, I don't care about the Mary Sue stuff. I don't care about the race of stormtroopers. I am more irritated that this film had so many creative and interesting directions it could have gone, and instead they created something very safe, very, nostalgic, very appealing to the fans of the original trilogy. Because again, more than anything else, and this really struck me rewatching this movie, I was like, wow, Force Awakens is the anti-prequels. Everything about this movie is designed to be a complicated apology for the prequel trilogy. It's Disney saying to the fans, "Oh, we're so sorry about those prequels. Like, well, we're gonna make Star Wars like you guys wanted from back in the day, right?" Unfortunately, the single thing that is kind of the focal element of Force Awakens, which is this whole idea that the Force Awakens is the anti-prequels, it's Star Wars for the people who like the original trilogy and don't like the prequels and want something different, that has shifted. Not that itself has shifted, but that kind of film doesn't land the same way now, because in the 10 years since Force Awakens came out, public perception of the prequels has shifted. Ahmed Best has a cameo in The Mandalorian back in 2023, and it is one of the most exciting and talked about moments of the show. Hayden Christensen steps out at Star Wars convention a few years back and gets a roaring applause. And fun fact, in August 15th of this year, threw the first pitch at a Chicago Cubs game, right? So the public perception of the prequels has completely shifted. There's much more of an embracing of them. There's more of a, even as flawed as they can be, there's been an embracing of the prequels. And as a result, Force Awakens has aged badly, in my opinion. But like Ricardo in the original episode, because again, listening back to the original episode, and I made some notes at around time code 15455, I want to say, like the OG episode, Ricardo says something like, talking about Revenge of the Sith, which was talking about, how there are certain plot beats that you go into the movie knowing because you've already seen the original trilogy, and being like, imagine if you watched these films without having seen the original trilogy first. Well, it turns out a whole generation of people did, and they're adults now. And the Star Wars fandom itself has shifted, and as a result, Force Awakens, as the anti-prequels, has been left behind. And so the thing about the film that was supposed to make it stand out is now the thing that has kind of become its undoing, because in an era where Star Wars fans, the majority of them anyway, are much more accepting of the prequel trilogy, where is there really a place for a movie like Force Awakens that is so thoroughly constructed to be a back to basics, return to form movie and an anti-prequels type project, if that makes sense?
All right, Ricardo, how do you feel about The Force Awakens, and to the extent you could mention its sequels?
Yeah, I think I insult J.J. Abrams one more time.
For all time's sake.
Yeah. And I also remember calling him, he's a very good tow truck driver, right? As I remember seeing something like that, right? Where, he's the kind of guy who, look, he'll give you a franchise, he'll bring it out, get it to the shop, but he's not the guy who should be working on the car, right? Give it to somebody more interesting, but he's the guy who he'll pull it out to the ditch for you, right? Your car crash, pull it out to the ditch, drive it to the shop, then no more. And I thought in my humble opinion, it was a huge mistake giving him a second film. That was a big bad call. Same thing with and I think I remember calling Rise of Skywalker Star Wars Into Darkness. Like I remember just saying something like that. But it was that. It was just this, like you're going back to lazy. Yeah, sorry.
Actually, you did call it that. And looking back at the film, because I watched it this morning, you're right. It is Star Wars Into Darkness.
Right, exactly, or something like that. And I still understand why this was made the way it was. Yes, I agree with you, CC. It doesn't hold up at all by being so almost like deliberately cynical in the whole, well, fuck them prequels, boy. We're going back to the old school, that bullshit now. And like, no, that is toxic nonsense. I'm sorry. Like, for all my problems with the prequels, like, you understand why they really would. I think the 20th anniversary, Sam Jackson and Hayden Christensen come out for screening. It was a big applause. It's a movie that I think holds up a lot better going back and watching back Revenge of the Sith. And then so for this kind of almost borderline cynical, weaponized internet cynicism kind of stuff and playing to that crowd, it really hold up. But it's still a movie that I think I like for what it is. I still am upset that they should have done more with this. And the main thing was the Red Redemption fellas, like they completely waste them.
Oh my god,
completely waste them. Because I remember hearing those dudes gonna be in Star Wars. I'm like, oh shit, you're giving them lightsabers? Fuck yes. And then I was like, well, they're not going to be Jedi or Sith. All right. I mean, they're going to be like the side guys, right? Like, remember, I think Kylo Ren has a Knights of Ren that's not going to use lightsabers, but they could, like, kind of still kick ass. Nah, not that either. They just have some kind of mercenaries. I'm like, oh, okay, that'll be kind of cool because, like Han Solo, they could have some weird weapons, and they're probably going to be like Peter Quill from Guardians of the Galaxy, kind of Star-Lord kind of somewhere they have a bunch of weird, cool devices and stuff, right? Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe. But they only get one scene and they're just gonna jump around for a while. I'm like, oh fuck that, Judd. Like that was such a bad. Like, I'm so mad how much you waste them. Anyway.
But I feel like
go ahead.
Well, I was about to say, I feel like that's the perfect metaphor for the sequel trilogy in general. I mean, obviously, like the J.J. Abrams sequel trilogy, right? Wow, what a cool idea. Pity you're going to do absolutely nothing with it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I think it's the perfect, like the use of the raid guys is the perfect metaphor in that regard. Because again, it's like, wow, you have so many interesting directions you could take this. Pity you're going to choose none of them.
Right. And then, and then for the when Last Jedi came out, I remember thinking, oh, I have a bunch of logical problems with this. All the Star Wars fans going to come out in the woodwork and defend this movie. And then the exact opposite happened. I was like, oh no, I have logic problems with it, but the movie looked amazing. One, the movie's impeccably shot. I thought they made some really, really cool, like, interesting choices. Like, for all the national teeth that this movie thing, and from what I gather after the fact, like, a lot of it was, like, deliberate political culture war stoking, to make noise and get people angry, for various political machinations and endings. So that's why it was amplified way more than it should have been. Because that movie felt like Gamergate 2.0. Like, it really felt like, it was kind of weird how much hate that movie was getting and the back and forth over that. But, the movie itself looked great. Like that scene where she do the fast and light thing and hit the ship. It's like, what kind of epic anime shit is this? And ultimately what they do with Luke, again, I think a couple of clumsy plot beats here or there, but it still was like, oh yeah, this is solid stuff. This makes sense. Like Luke kind of going crazy because his father is like a weird homunculus, right? Like learning about your father is a weird homunculus, kind of F you up a little bit, right? Like let me admit that, right? And then yeah, it's impeccably shot. It's great. And yeah, for all the noise that people make about it, Ray from Nobody was a great idea. I thought that was a really good idea. That's a really that's a good answer to the whole where Ray come from kind of stuff. Instead of it being, well, Obi-Wan is your daddy or some bullshit like that. No, it's just she just from nowhere, and that's how the Force's course correct itself and deal with problems. That make a lot of sense to me. That work. And people just had a complete meltdown over this effing movie. But I enjoyed for what it was. I enjoyed for what it was. It is the one that I thought again is the one that tries something interesting. Again, Rian Johnson, same guy who did Looper, which I thought didn't make a lick of sense. But Looper is still a great film thematically, like what they're trying to do and say. And this one is the same thing. And then I thought the ending with Luke, what he did at the ending is so fucking cool, though. Like that is great. Like that was like the coolest fucking thing ever. And to me, like that makes sense if you're like a big time high passive guy. This is what something like what I felt they should have done with Yoda in episode 2, right? Instead of him actually fighting and actually thinking, like, no, he had to be all high passive, kind of just effing with your mind kind of stuff now. There's that kind of stuff, right? And yeah, it's like what they do with Lucas was perfect. Like he just set a shadow clone like across the galaxy instantaneously, and it drained him and killed him eventually. But like that's how he does fight. That's how like real Jedi does fight. That makes sense. I thought that was a really cool idea. But yeah,
that was genius. Yeah.
So Last Jedi is the one that holds up the best in my humble opinion. And then we get to Rise of Skywalker, and then to me that was just a colossal waste of my time. Rise of Skywalker don't work at all. Again, I think it was a big mistake that giving him J.J. Abrams the second film. They shouldn't have do that. I remember it was floated that Ava DuVernay was going to do the third film. I heard that floated for a while, but no, it was supposed to be Trevor. Right, and then I
think that what happened was Wrinkle in Time underperformed in that conversation.
Right, I think so. That's the narrative I remember as well. But Trevorrow, like the stuff that Trevorrow was supposed to do, to me felt more interesting. They were going to go back to Coruscant, and Rey was supposed to get a dual lightsaber, which would make perfect sense because like he had a boot staff at the beginning. But you have a good person with the double lightsaber. That would have been really cool, especially the fact that you could do it in the video game. I forget the name of the video game. They had a part 2 the other day. Jedi is a game that came out, but I forget when it came out. Jedi Survivor, right? The first one.
Oh, okay.
Right, the first Jedi Survivor, and that was what year that was, boy. Jedi Survivor is that was like a little after. Okay, but but stuff like that, like you could give her the thing, and that would be, and they would go back to Coruscant and do a lot of stuff. And here's the thing, the whole bringing back Palpatine thing is not the worst idea, though, but how they did it is kind of terrible.
with the jar of pickled Snokes.
Right, yeah, no, it was really stupid. Like I felt if it's anything they could have done, like Palpatine as the evil Force Ghost, where like evil Force Ghosts can't leave where they're dead. That's a whole thing. Like so, good Force Ghosts. Yeah, good Force Ghosts could go anywhere. Sorry,
had to leave with his granddaughter, for goodness sake.
Yeah, the whole granddaughter thing don't work at all. Like it's just like I get what they're going for. And here's the thing, again, to be fair to JJ, I get what you're trying to go for, I get what you're trying to go for. But it really arbitrary and comes out of nowhere. And it's like, look, it either you give him the whole trilogy or you give him one movie, right? It was a big mistake doing what they did, and it was a really bad call. I really felt they should have just go through it with Trevorrow's thing, or just give him it and make it work. Like forget how much money he make, or whatever it is like that. Just give him it because JJ not gonna like handle this well, and he didn't. I just didn't think he did it at all, and yeah, it was just a mess. The whole thing was a mess. Like Chewie, they try to fake out Chewie dead, but he's not dead, and he come back. And then they do a sort of like lazy bullshit with like we call him look, I like the actor, but like he and this is like nonsense, right? We call him oh gosh, Ladona.
Oh god.
Yeah,
and in our review we talked about that still cringe ending with him and the girl.
Boy.
Yeah, but that's supposed to be his daughter, and like alright, I mean,
but the way how he says the line is like, wait a minute, that's kind of creepy. What was
yeah. And then they do like some. I mean, that third movie was so bad. That ninth movie that was so bad because like it had so many bad moments. Like, well, they erased we call C-3PO memory, and then it come back one time. It's like, all right, so what the fuck we doing here? Like it was a mess, total mess. And they have good people, you know. They bring in what's your name, boy? He Gale from Felicity.
Kerry Russell.
Kerry Russell didn't do
Oh,
nothing.
boy.
So this garbage backstory with Poe and like, all right, well, your relationship with Poe, we can't see anything with that. No, moving on. It is really bad stuff. And you could tell that he fit 2 movies worth of material in 1 movie, and then he just like rush it, and it didn't work. And it's like, well, bro, you shouldn't have do this yet. Like they shouldn't have give you this at all. Your first movie, tow truck, nice it. Leave it from there. Give Trevor it. They should have give Trevor it. Moving on. Whatever. As for TFA, yeah, I don't know. I get why it was made the way it was. I agree with you, CC. It is something that doesn't age well because of how, let's admit it, a little mean-spirited, right? Like it has this very
Right.
deliberate appealing to the mean-spirited aspect of the fandom. And Star Wars fandom, let us be clear, I'm sorry to say it, but the Star Wars fandom is probably the most trash out of there. That is because of the size.
No, I am in the trenches of the Star Wars fandom. I will agree with you. Star Wars fandom is trash.
But they're pretty bad because they just get bad. They were terrible to Ahmed Best. They were terrible to Jake Lloyd. Everything involving that Last Jedi back and forth was terrible. Like,
and I think that you can make a strong argument that the audience that Disney cultivated with Force Awakens and the people they were trying to signal that Star Wars was for them now were kind of the people who were always going to hate The Last Jedi. Like they cultivated the wrong audience for Last Jedi and shot themselves in the foot in the process. Is very much what I it became this insane nonsense. As I said, I do think larger political forces amplify the problem. I do think so. I genuinely think so. Well, but yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Well, another moment from you. There were 2 moments that I wanted to make sure that you brought up in the original episode we did. You brought up that in the original, because we were talking about Red Letter Media and I was talking about my issues with them, and you were saying that while you don't have the same issues that I did, at least not at the time, the thing that you agreed with was that they did a pretty good job of splitting the fandom along generational lines. Right. Like very much like you're either for this or you're against this. And the problem I think you very, very presciently predicted in that way that the Star Wars fandom is always going to have a problem where every time a new piece of Star Wars media comes out, the fandom splits in a for or against sort of way. Like every single time, it's almost like clockwork now. Every single time this is one of the reasons why the fandom is trash. Every single time a new piece of Star Wars media comes out, the fandom splits. Yeah. Into camps of either, I think this is the greatest thing ever. I think this is the worst thing ever, and it needs to get a petition going to get it removed from the internet, right?
Right. I don't know. It's kind of weird that this play out the way it did, and this is coming from somebody who don't think all of Disney Star Wars is bad. Like there's a lot to like for the most part. Like again, absolutely love Andor. I thought Skeleton Crew was pretty solid. Didn't really care for Book of Boba Fett, but like most of Mandalorian. And I felt, I thought we were going to just get into the doldrums of complete mediocrity forever. We were just going to get a bunch of 6 and 7 or 10 out of 10 films, and it wasn't going to try anything, and it was going to play it safe forever, as long as it make money. And it's like, well, we didn't get that. We got like a really mixed bag. Some stuff works, some stuff doesn't work, but it works for different reasons. And I felt, they could have do this differently. And again, unfortunately, internet culture war nonsense, poisoning the debate. But stuff that I don't like, but you feel like, I don't really want to be on the side of these weirdos, right? That kind of stuff. The one of the twins. It's up in my mind right now. Amanda Selberg. I forget the show.
Acolyte. Yeah.
Acolyte. Right. Where I thought,
which may not be doing a rounds again, and that's another story.
Right. No, but the thing with Acolyte, it was like I didn't hate Acolyte because of the acting or the story. It's just like it's half of a good story. Like when it got interesting, that's when it ended. I was like, oh no, this need to be like that. Felt like half of a season, but like weirdos on the internet completely poisoned the discourse. So I kind of feel like a weird asshole. So like kind of siding with them, but I'm not siding with them for this reason. Like, is that right? Whatever. You get the point. And because the discourse get poisoned for all kind of extraneous reasons, it's like, it's hard for me to like take this for it is. But as TFA was as it was, like I understand why TFA was made the way it was. Like if I was in charge, I'd have probably make it like this too, maybe, right? But that kind of stuff, it really unfortunate that they could have just, my humble opinion, it would have just been I would have just put different action beats and use characters more. That is my main problem. Like what I remember having a problem with this one was like they kind of just completely waits Gwendolyn Christie. Like she look like a badass, and they don't do anything with her. It's like, yeah, just make her
Right.
Darth Vader again. Like have her fly, have her do something. No, she just there looking like a badass. So like, all right, fine, but and then we got that with the Knights of Ren in the ninth film. Them just standing
God.
around again. They're looking like badasses. I love these costume designs, but are they going to fucking do something? Like, what the hell, Jared? Like, it's a damn shame. And especially in the decade of the 2000s where we have premier action cinema, right? Like, the Raid
Right.
came out, dog. Like, you have these amazing movies. Like use them. And we don't get that at all. And that's how it is. I don't know. In the 10 years, it's, Disney, being, sorry to say it, is Disney just, I don't know, it's just a particular generation of filmmaker who get confused by I shouldn't say filmmaker, but producer. Like, just get confused about what should have been done and who could have done it. And you get again, unfortunately, people who I don't think they make the best decisions, but at the same time, the opposition make way too much noise for me to like say jumping or piling onto them. But like, yeah, everything involving Kathleen Kennedy, right? She make
Right.
she made a bunch of like bad calls. I think so, but she made good calls too. Like, so is that. And so like, am I all of a sudden Cartman from South Park, for this nonsense now, because everybody had to make some shitty anti-gay joke or something like that, right? And that's the problem. The discourse gets so toxic and poisonous. It's like, well, all right, I'm at the out, and I'm just gonna judge the movie. So
Yes.
it is, and just not really like take this on. And sadly you got out with 9, right? But yeah, 7 is a film that watching it back, I'll tell myself, I would have just, to me, they just have better action beats. I think that's the only change. And then I would have done more with Finn. And I would have probably like leaned into the Force Dyad thing a little better. I thought the Force Dyad concept is really interesting. Like, thought that was a cool idea. They could have done more with that, and maybe like Rey could choose the Force Dyad. So it's like a kind of pseudo love triangle, something with her and like Finn and Ren, and or Rey, Ren, Finn. You could do something like that, but it's like a Force Dyad thing and a show. Whatever.
Right.
I just more bullshit after the fact, Monday morning quarterback it, right? Like, but it's that. And so I don't know. 7, I get why it was made the way it was, because it makes a lot of sense making it like this. But it was too much of an allusion to the fan base, and stuff like that just kind of just rubbed me the wrong way. It rubbed me the wrong way back then, and still rubs me the wrong way now. So that's my last take on TFE.
All right, Alicia, your look at TFA now, 10 years after the fact, and you can mention about how you feel about the subsequent films and TV shows that came out of it.
Well, looking at it 10 years later, I mean, I just enjoy it for what it is. I know that the fandom, everybody thinks that it could have been done better or whatever. The reality is that new Disney studios, whatever they call themselves now, I don't really like the way that they do things right now in terms of most of their films and animations, like the direction that they're heading in. I'm honestly not a big fan of modern day. It is really, really untrue. So I don't have a lot of great expectations if they were to, well, not if, when they are to come back with another trilogy or something like that. I don't have a lot of great expectations unless they do something really drastic with Disney Studios on the whole. Because I haven't even liked the recent Marvel stuff that is released either. And in terms of the Star Wars series, I haven't gotten to watch not a lot of them. Mostly the Mandalorian. The others, like I said, I'm not a huge into Star Wars kind of fan. I'm more a Star Trek kind of girl. So I can't really honestly form an opinion about those. But in terms of the film, I enjoyed looking at it on my projector. It was very pretty to look at. I really would have liked to see a little more character development when it came to Kylo Ren and his parentage, and also Rey and Finn, because really and truly, Finn just going rogue as a stormtrooper, it still didn't make too much sense to me, because apparently he was supposed to get report for recondition. It seems as though the way that the stormtroopers behave is because they're constantly reconditioned or brainwashed or mind wiped or whatever. Maybe like the Winter Soldier to report for duties and things. So I don't know how come in his case the mind wiping didn't work because he had the force or whatever was stronger. I don't. That part kind of goes straight over my head. So I would have liked a little bit more explanation in terms of that in Force Awakens. Um, Aspects that I really, really enjoyed were the interactions with another little robot, BB-8. I love that little robot. The same feeling that I had when I saw R2D2, I had when I saw BB-8. I don't know if I'm likening it to a pet or something like that, but I just thought that the robot was really cute. With
Well,
those squeaks and stuff like that.
Well, sorry to interject there, Alicia, but yeah, I loved the design of BB-8 then, and I still do, right? It's something about just the ball shape, the way how it moves. I love the fact, because they actually revealed this in Last Jedi, his head could actually reattach itself, right? There's like a magnet that brings it back, There's one scene that I love with BB-8, for example, where he's going down a flight of steps, and it's just him rolling like, ba-doop, ba-doop, and it's so cute and funny at the same
I saw
time.
that. I saw that. Yeah, that was when
That was when Ray was looking heard the voices when he was in the cantina scene.
Oh yes, and he cantina scene, but he does it again in Last Jedi as well too, where Roseanne went to get the person to break the code.
Right. Yes.
He does that again.
I forgot to mention. Benicio del Toro was in Last Jedi. I forgot about that. Yes, he was.
But the actions of the little robot, and like I said, it was so cute. And I found myself any little explosion or anything, and he was close by. I wanted to see him like he was there, that he wasn't blown to smithereens. And I was like, okay, yeah, baby, there, he fine. Okay, cool, I good. I found that the ending sequence with the fight between Finn and Kylo Ren, and then Rey and Kylo Ren, was a bit anticlimactic for me. I was looking for a bit more emotion out of the scene, And although, well, big spoiler to anybody who hasn't seen TFA as yet, the scene where Kylo kills his father did shock me incredibly the first time I watched it. I remember seeing that in cinema. I was like, oh my God, he just killed his father. He just killed Han Solo. Oh my God.
Yeah, the first legacy character in this new trilogy get wiped out, get killed.
Yeah, and I really didn't expect them to kill off Han Solo so early into the trilogy, because I was excited as a big fan of the character and of Harrison Ford. I didn't expect them to kill him off so quickly, So there was a bit of disappointment and shock in that moment for me as well too, because I really didn't want them to kill off that character so early in the game. I wanted him to stick around and see the dynamic between him and Leia, and why it didn't work out, and then the complications with Kylo Ren and Luke Skywalker, and when he went to the dark side. And I think that part could have been developed a bit more. Other than that, like I said, I watched it for what it was, as a person who was not as adept into the Star Wars mythos as you guys, but I did point out what I wished to see and what I thought was disappointing.
Right, I understand. All right, so I will let Tracy close things off, seeing that he loves this film so much, right? But I'll just give my quick retrospective thoughts on the film, right? Retrospective thoughts, right? And it's a good thing you brought up the prequel trilogy, right? So I think, like, just looking back, right, just to touch on the prequel trilogy, for a sec, right? You could say what you want about why we needed it in the first place, outside of we need to have the first 3 episodes, right? But outside of that, right, with its flaws or whatnot, at least it was sort of justified, because we had to kind of explain how come Darth Vader became the way how he is, right? It made perfect sense to build this trilogy, the narrative of this trilogy, on the birth of Darth Vader, right? How Anakin switch over to the dark side, right? That makes a lot of sense, right? But I think, like, the issue with this sequel trilogy, right, is that now that Darth Vader has been defeated, right, it's where do we go next, right? So on paper, and looking back at it, no, I do appreciate how they were trying to incorporate new characters and new conceits, like, say, like the New Order and Rey and Finn and all these kind of things, right? But because the previous trilogy had, a few legacy characters that we saw at a younger age, right? That would be like Obi-Wan and Anakin and stuff like that, right? You have to include some legacy characters in this, right? So of course the thing is, okay, well, we're doing a sequel, so we had to bring in legacy characters here, right? So who do we pick, right? So of course, the perfect thing would be like, Leia and Han Solo and Luke and thing like that, right? But now that brings up this whole problem now that I feel like, Disney really was focusing on, and this is why decisions were made the way they were, the way they did, right? Where you had to kind of justify the sequel's existence, but at the same time, you have to kind of bring in these legacy characters to kind of justify, hey, this is still Star Wars, and listen, we the last Star Wars film we had was 10 years ago, so hey, one big sell is, okay, we need to bring the diehard fans back, so let's bring back Harrison Ford, let's bring back Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill and stuff like that, right? So I feel that's why this sequel trilogy is the way it is, right? Like, it's trying to cater to all the fans, right? While with the prequel, it was more like bringing in, like, it started off with bringing in kids to the franchise, right? New audiences, right? Newer, younger fans, if you will, right? And then the fans grew with the second and third installments, right? But here it's like, okay, we need to just kind of cater to everybody, right? Or else they will all be pissed at us, right? Because you have to kind of justify, hey, Disney's running this, and they're going to be like, oh, Disney's going to run this? Not too sure, So the show itself sort of plays out in such a way that everybody is happy, right? But in retrospect, no, I just felt like, similar to The Last Jedi, I felt like this film could have just taken more creative risk, more narrative risk as well, right? Like, told its own story and kind of show like, hey, this is life after Return of the Jedi. This is how the world is, or how the universe is after that, right? But again, because of what I said earlier, they have to kind of harken back to the past, right? So if you look, like, I do like this, the past being like this, like relics now, you know what I mean? And they just have to be unearthed or dusted off, and it's like, oh wow, you still alive, or this thing still exists, right? I had touch, but one thing I have to just point out quickly, right, about Mark Hamill. I'll never forget seeing the end of that film, right? And yes, when Luke was shown on screen, the audience I was with erupted at that. I love the fact that when Last Jedi came around, and after the big action sequence that opened that film, and we cut back to that scene in the mountain with Rey handing out the lightsaber to Luke. Luke takes it and throws it away. I love that. And I feel that probably pissed some diehard fans off, but I love that in terms of just setting up where Luke's mind is at, right? But again, with that film, at least it was sort of taken, oh, okay, well, we need to progress the characters. Let's see how they do that. And I felt like that film did it much better than this one here, right? This one kind of played it safe because it had to cater to everybody, right? That being said, I still can enjoy The Force Awakens as a Star Wars, product, right? I would say this trilogy compared to the prequel trilogy boasts like stellar visual effects. So like, just like, if you would just look at the visual effects, just look at like the production design and the visuals for this trilogy compared to the prequel trilogy, it looks much better in my opinion, right? You could tell like they are working with some high-end visual effects and graphics and stuff like that, right? So it looks great across the board, right? But it's just the narrative that I felt they could have just worked a little bit better, right? So yeah, at the end of the day, I could still enjoy TFA as just as a return to form, if you will, right? Like a throwback film, like you're just going back to what made episode 4 stand out so well, right? With the pace and the action scenes and how exciting and thrilling and adventurous it all is, right? I felt they could have done more with Finn in retrospect too, because I do like the idea, like just the mere fact that, oh, we have a stormtrooper who does not want to be a stormtrooper. I felt they could explore that, but they didn't. In the second and the third films, they didn't even bother, right? With Rey kind of having the torch being passed in terms of continuing on the legacy of the Jedi, I think works as well. The whole Mary Sue thing, I never bought for a second. I just thought it was just like, oh, you just do like the fact that we have a female protagonist. That's what it is, right? But if you think that she's a Mary Sue, okay, fine. But I didn't find so, and even when I rewatched the film, I didn't think so, right? She made logical decisions, right? But the mere fact that she make a lot of them make you call her Mary Sue, okay, whatever, right? Kylo Ren is effective enough as a villain. The whole whiny brat thing kind of holds up. It's just the second film had to kind of justify it. But I just felt like, because of what happened in Rise of Skywalker, they really could have set up the whole Palpatine thing in that episode, in that film, instead of just waiting all the way to the end to kind of bring him into the story, right? Because you mentioned Darth Vader, now we have Snoke here, so why not mention Palpatine? They never did, right? But yeah, I mean, I could go on and on, right? But yeah, for what it's worth, it's fine. It's still an entertaining Star Wars film. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites, even all-time favorites, sorry, even though I had it as number 5 as far as best films of 2015, right? But yeah, it was because Star Wars was not reinvented, reinvigorated, right? I think that's why I enjoyed it so much, right? But yeah, even though it doesn't hold up as much or as well as it could have, there's still a lot to appreciate and enjoy here, right? Just as just a slice of just escapist sci-fi action adventure. I mean, it still works, right? But that's what we come to expect from a Star Wars film, right? But I don't know, like I guess for me, I just wanted more depth to it. Like I just wanted something akin to Revenge of the Sith, right? Where you was really giving us something that I never really see before, right? Here, it just sort of plays the beats, and it does it because, it's catering to like legions of fans of different demographics and generations or whatnot. So, the show just had to play out the way it did, right? It's just really interesting that 2 years after that, and a year after we got Rogue One, which I would say actually tried something different. Here we had Last Jedi, where it's like, listen, I really want to do something. I really want to tell something really compelling with this new Star Wars narrative that we paint in here, right? But it's just a shame that the Star Wars fan base literally had to crucify poor Rian Johnson because he was trying to at least do something new with the franchise going forward here, right? And yeah, with the Rise of Skywalker, it's like, well, okay, since y'all didn't like that, let's just go back to what it is. Or they're like, let's just bring back Palpatine. All they like Palpatine, let's bring him back, right? And that was what it was. But again, just in rewatching it, I should mention this is the second time that I watch Rise of Skywalker. I have not seen it since 2019, right? I don't hate it as much as I did. I'm still disappointed by it, but I don't hate it, right? It's a show that I see now and it's like, all right, okay, fine, whatever. Wouldn't buy it separate, but I would buy it as part as a box set, right? But that's how it is. But yeah, for me, as far as, TFA goes, yeah, 4 to 5, it is what it is. Don't love it, don't hate it, but I still enjoy it. And I'm still entertained by it. It could have been like the Casino Royale in a sense, right? It could have been like the Daniel Craig era of the Bond films, where it's like, oh, we're taking the stuff that you know and love about James Bond, but we're putting a fresh new spin on it, right? Without losing the essence about what the franchise has always been about, right? So I felt they really could have done that here with this first film here, The Force Awakens. And yeah, that's how I feel about it now. All right, so Ricardo, your final thoughts and rating on The Force Awakens.
Oh no, yeah. Well, I kind of say everything I need to say pretty much. Yeah, final thoughts and rating. Yeah, still, I'll probably give it like a 7 out of 10. For what it was, but that is again the product and the calculation at the time, right? But in retrospect, it doesn't age as well as it could, and it's a shame that they kind of squandered a bunch of opportunities. But as it is, in terms of the decision you're doing it to start over a franchise, I understand it's kind of like Man of Steel or something like that. The follow up needed to be better to help it, because if the follow ups were better, it would be better. But because the follow-up sucked, it's kind of suck in retrospect. So that's how I feel about it.
Well, my final thoughts are just that, like I told you, I just take the film as it is. It's, in terms of atmosphere and aesthetics, it's very pretty to look at. While the plot has a lot of issues in terms of like bringing back the legacy characters, issues with killing them off too soon or not expanding them enough. I mean, nothing is perfect, and you're never going to satisfy such a large and apparently very crazy and obsessive fan base. You're never going to be able to satisfy everybody. So in terms of my rewatch and stuff, I'll give it a rating of 3 out of 5. It's something every now and then, like I like to do at least once a year, where I watch like all these Star Wars films, and it's just something I enjoy without too much judgment and ripping it apart, for want of a better word. So yeah, not all aspects satisfy me over the passage of time, But let's remain hopeful that the studios don't repeat and they learn from their mistakes with the possible next trilogy in the future.
10 years later, I do think that the position I very much stand by my general assessment. Like, it's interesting listening back to those thoughts and thinking about younger me and what my criteria was for film at the time versus kind of what I go to film and other art forms for now. But I mean, and I do not begrudge the people who enjoy Force Awakens. Like I do not. I simply let me be clear. I am not. My dislike of Force Awakens is not any kind of, this is where I will draw a line to myself and the more rancid parts of the fandom, right? I do not think that because I do not enjoy Force Awakens means that I will think less of people who do. I think for myself, it is very much the fact that like I need novelty from Star Wars. I need Star Wars to take risks and try new things and do things that are different and interesting and creative. And it's frustrating. I mean, and then especially when you think about, again, Ricardo kind of mentioned this earlier, but thinking about something like Revenge of the Sith, a movie that compared to the rest of the franchise takes very bold swings and is very daring and very exciting, and a movie that has kind of crept higher and higher up my list of favorite movies over the years. And then you compare them to something like Force Awakens that feels so safe and so tame and so just easy crowd pleaser. We're not trying anything especially creative or innovative. It's just, let's take the first film of the franchise and kind of retread it, essentially stealth remake it without actually making a full-blown remake. And it's just kind of, watching the film now felt like an exercise in tedium. Like, this is why I don't begrudge the people who have a good time with it, because like I do not have a good time with this movie. Like, trying to watch it now, it feels, I feel bored. I feel like very unexcited by anything that like happens in the movie as a result. And so it's hard to like enjoy it all that much. And again, I also think that one of the weirder things about Force Awakens is that it put a lot of pressure on New Hope. I think one of the reasons why, and I'm including myself in here, New Hope is a movie that Star Wars fans, like a lot of Star Wars fans, talk about less fondly, is that, you know, because Force Awakens is such a retread of New Hope, it forces people to kind of look back at New Hope and go, wow, that movie's got its flaws as well. And like, even thinking about that, like listening back to the episode from 10 years ago and realizing that, like, you know, my position, like if you asked me now, I would definitely rank Revenge of the Sith higher than New Hope. I would definitely rank Revenge of the Sith higher at this point in my life, just because of like the kind of things I go to film for. So all that to say, unfortunately, and all this to say that the film is still competently made. Force Awakens is still a competently made film on a technical level that is still interesting and exciting as far as like action and effects and things like that. But I need more from my entertainment than that, And so I find myself very thoroughly ranking Force Awakens as a 4 out of 10. Below average, unexciting. A movie that unfortunately also kind of signaled some, Alicia kind of mentioned this, but kind of some like trends for where entertainment was going in general at the time, and kind of how things would become increasingly reliant on nostalgia, and how we would be getting into the era of the legacy sequel, where like you get all these things like Ghostbusters Rebirth or whatever it was, Afterlife, and all these other projects that are all the like, it's a new younger cast with the old people and they're coming back for one last hurrah, you know, that kind of thing, which is a trend that I broadly don't like. So yeah, final thoughts and rating. Star Wars The Force Awakens has aged quite badly in the 10 years since it came out, and I would now rank it quite thoroughly as a 4 out of 10 movie. 2 out of 5.
Here's the thing: it's still one of my top films. It still does things for me. So I would still give it like a 7.5 out of 10, maybe an 8 out of 10. That kind of vibes in terms of just bringing back Star Wars to the actual screen, because there are stories, whether they are apocryphal or not, but there are stories of like Uncle George has, and to be honest, I think he even talked about it. He has had scripts and scripts and scripts and scripts of things that he wanted to do, like, you know, underworld stories and all that kind of stuff. And after what the fan base was like after the prequels, he literally just packed it there. So the idea of somebody saying, okay, let's bring it back, but let's start by giving something there that is maybe a little safe, but at the same point in time still is open enough that if you wanted to have like a 7-year-old come and see it, you can and enjoy it, and that's your new Star Wars, brilliant. My issue remains in terms of the trilogy and Lucasfilm and all that kind of stuff. And there's some random little notes that I'll just rattle off here. Disney execs tend to get like a lot of heat, especially the idea of not even Disney executives, but Kathleen tends to get a lot of heat. But I realized one and two things. One, there's sort of what I call like the Ike Perlmutter vibes that was there in Disney, and it seems to be creeping back because of the current political climate and there's stuff that goes on inside there that I hear about or like you read about or whatever it is like that, and you kind of wonder about it. And also in terms of the fan base, the idea of the seesaw life that we have as fans. I mean, Dave Filoni was heir apparent and everybody loved Dave. And oh my God, I wish Dave would be creative director. Dave is now meant to be the head of Lucasfilm, or at least the creative director for Lucasfilm now. And people groan. Why? Because he himself did like Ahsoka's show, and there was involvement with like Book of Boba Fett and that kind of stuff like that. And people didn't understand that he is literally the right hand of George. This is how George would think. So you have stuff like that, up to even the idea of like Pedro, how everybody started loving Pedro, and now it's like, what the hell, Pedro? Or even Jon Favreau, who came on and brought you Mandalorian. And it's the same man who is still doing Mandalorian. He's just expanded the story, and now everybody has a problem because, oh my God, there's a Katie Sackhoff is more the Mandalorian. One of the better things I liked about TFA was the idea, strangely enough, of killing off Han Solo, because Harrison has always talked about the idea that there needed to be a major sacrifice that happened. He wanted Han Solo to die from since Empire Strikes Back, but that didn't play itself out. I feel like maybe the trilogy could have had a one director route. I thought it was probably a fun and brave and exciting thing to say we will have 3 directors come in and 3 directors will bring in their different takes, but maybe they could have had a little bit more of a meeting of the minds so that everybody would be on board, or just have one person sign on for the rest of the sequel trilogy. In terms of, and this is just as a by the way, but in terms of like Rise of Skywalker, when they came out with the title of Rise of Skywalker, I thought that it was going to be sort of like a new religion. So when you say that the last Jedi, and you play it to the idea that the last Jedi was Luke because he followed the ideals of the last Jedi, even though at the end of it, he alludes to the idea of Rey being the last Jedi. When you come up and you say the Rise of Skywalker, in my brain, it was the idea of, okay, we're done calling these people Sith and Jedi. That has been a 1,000-year routine. From now on, people of the light would be called Skywalkers. Kind of like in Christianity, you have Calvinism and you have, Catholicism one way and Mormonism another way and all this kind of stuff, but it still follows a general idea. Skywalkers might have been the new thing. And in a very weird way, I have a feeling that might still fly when the new Rey trilogy comes into play, but that's on a whole other different scene. It has its flaws. Again, my issue with Lucasfilm will always be you have all this canon, not even the stuff that is, legends now, but you have canon books that talks about Phasma's life when she was growing up and how ruthless she was in her own planet before she came over and joined Hux. There's books there that talks about Hux when he was growing up and his father was the worst. Like, there are things that you could pull to sort of make your stories better. And yes, you want to give your filmmakers enough creative freedom to be able to do what they need to do with the films. But this is basically a religion. It is important, therefore, that you have all your ducks in a row, or at least if you're going to do things different and be changing with it, which would be good, use from the source materials that you have. And that will probably be my randomness. And then to wrap everything up based off of that one point, it's something that Stranger Things seems to be getting better at, and I wish Lucasfilm would pull. Because Stranger Things has, like right now in season 5, you have a whole scene going on where there's a musical. The musical is on stage and there's stuff that's happening in the musical. If you have seen the musical, you get a better understanding of how some of the characters and some of the antagonists are orchestrating. And even if you haven't seen the musical, there's still little drops and things inside there that will add to it. you as Lucasfilm have so much material that you can pull from that could explain things so that people don't leave the cinema saying, what the hell was the point of John Boyega, when we all know that John was meant to be like this force sensitive kind of something. So 10 years later, it's still Christmas to me in terms of the idea of Star Wars December and like the 3 movies that came out of it. But it is flawed. It does have a great deal of flaws that we cannot override. Let's be real about it. And it will always gripe me that you don't dip within your well. But I'd still sit down and watch it, crack some popcorn and have a good time.